Hello everybody, this is Tracy and welcome to the RxJS workshop. I hope you enjoyed solving our last coding challenge, the Pangram challenge. And now I'll share my solution with you. The solution I'm going to show you is not the only way to solve this coding challenge. It's one of the ways of solving this coding challenge. So do bear that in mind, particularly if you have your own solution to the coding challenge. Let's just recap how the application should work once you've completed the challenge. For any sentence or group of words entered into the text area, the application should display some information about that sentence or group of words. It should display a label telling us if the sentence is a pangram, that is, every letter in the alphabet appears in the sentence at least once. And we should also get a label display when the sentence is a lipogram. For instance, if I remove the W from this sentence, it now contains every letter except the letter W, which makes it a lipogram, along with telling us whether the entered sentence or phrase or group of words is a pangram or lipogram. We should see displayed some total count information, namely the total number of alphas, the total number of vowels, and the total number of consonants. And for each letter, we should see a display of the count for each letter. For the letter or letters which have the highest count, we should see that number displayed in green. And for the letter which makes the sentence or phrase a lipogram, that is the single letter which has a count of 0, we should see that letter displayed in brown. When we click on any letter, the text area should display that letter highlighted in blue. Every instance of that letter highlighted in blue. And when we click on that same letter again, it should remove that highlighting. For any letter that has a count of 0, we should not be able to click on it. And we also have this generate a sentence button, which when we click on it, generates a pseudo sentence. That is, it's a collection, a random collection of Latin words. And when we click on the generate a sentence button and enter that collection of words into the text area, the display of counts should update accordingly, as well as the pangram, lipogram label. So that's how the application should work once you've coded your solution. For the starting point of this coding challenge, I gave you a number of files, including the template file, which is already set up to receive all of the information from the service and component file that you need to code. So essentially, you should not have needed to make any changes to this template file. Currently, the component file is set up with all of the interface information that you need, and it's currently using a default object using that interface. And we also have the necessary methods that you'll need to implement when a letter is clicked or when a sentence or phrase is entered into the text area. And we also have a handler method used when the generate a sentence button is clicked. In the application service, I also set up a few interfaces, the sentence stats interface and the letter stats interface. And I've also put in stubs for the methods that are needed to make the application work. So that's our starting point. And now I'll begin adding code to show you my solution to the challenge. So in the browser, I'm going to switch to the tab which has the starting point running. So as I code, we'll see the changes to the application in the browser. So where do we begin? The first place where we can begin is with understanding what's in the component file. So we have this VM interface, which has 4 properties: sentence stats, letter stats, selected car, and highlighted sentence. And these are the properties and their values that are being used in our template to display all of our information. So the thing that we can do is create 4 observable properties on our service, which will emit the results for each one of the properties in the VM interface. So let's start doing that. Now, the first observable properties that we should create on our service are those observables which emit the values that come directly from our UI, namely the sentence or phrase that's entered into the text area and the letter that is clicked when we click one of the letter displays. So for those types of observables, I like to use subjects, and namely behavior subjects. Why behavior subjects? Well, because they are the type of subjects that we can initialize with values. So for instance, when we load our application, we want to see that Pangram sentence already entered into the text area. So anytime you have a situation where you want your observable to contain an initialized value, a behavior subject is the way to go. So I'll create 2 behavior subjects. We'll call the first sentence subject. And we'll use a behavior subject of type string. And the initial value for this subject will be that Pangram sentence, which is a constant coming from our constants file. And we'll expose the observable properties of this subject using the asObservable method. So what am I doing here? I create a subject which is both an observable and an observer, which means we can call the subscribe method on this subject as well as the next and complete and error methods. But we only want to expose the observer methods, that is next, error, and complete. We only want to expose those on the service itself. We don't want to expose those publicly. To expose only the subscribe method, we call the asObservable on the subject, and the variable returned by that will have only the subscribe method on it. So this is our sentence observable. We also need an observable for the selected letter. So we can call this subject selected car subject. And we can also use a behavior subject. And we can set this initially as the empty string. And again, we'll expose only the observable methods, that is the subscribe methods, publicly. Awesome. So now we have the 2 observables, which will help us retrieve information from our user interface into our service. Now, whenever the selected car observable emits, we want to make a slight adjustment. And that's because if you remember the way that the app works, whenever you click on a letter for the first time, we want that letter to be highlighted in the sentence or phrase. When you click a subsequent time on that same letter, we want the highlighting to go away. Now, in order to do this type of processing on the emitted value from selected car, we need an operator which remembers the previous value or the previously emitted value of the selected car observable to determine what should be emitted. The operator that has the capability of maintaining what was previously emitted from our observable and doing some manipulation according to the current emission of the observable is the scan operator. So I'm going to add the scan operator to the pipeline of selected car. And the scan operator takes what's called an accumulator function. And an accumulator function takes two parameters. It takes the accumulator, which in our case will be a string, and the current value, which also will be a string. And we can give the accumulator function a seed value, which we'll set as the empty string. And what we want to do is we want to evaluate whether the current value is the same as the previous value. So we can do a triple equality check on the current value and the accumulated value. And if they are equal, then we want to emit the empty string. And what that means is that we've clicked on the same letter a subsequent time. So we want to unhighlight that letter in the text area. But if they are not equal, then we want to pass the current value. And I'll just bring in an import for this. Now, with these two observables in place, sentence observable and selected car observable, we can create all of the necessary observables for our VM object. So first, let's create the highlighted sentence observable. Which is going to be of safe HTML or undefined. It's a union type of safe HTML and undefined. And we'll derive this observable using the selected car because this will serve as the observable that populates the text area with the selected letter being highlighted throughout the sentence. So not only will we need the selected car observable, but we're also going to need the sentence observable because it's the value that we want to modify. So we can use the withLatestFrom operator and pass it the sentence observable. And now all we need is a mapping which highlights the selected letter throughout the sentence. So the selected car observable along with withLatestFrom, that will return a tuple which has two values. We'll call them selected car and sentence, and both of those values are of type string. And I'm just going to paste in the code which does the transformation of the sentence into HTML, which marks up the selected letter throughout that sentence. and I'll do the import here. So essentially what this code is doing is whenever a letter is emitted, if the letter is not the empty string, then it's going to search for the letter throughout the sentence using a regular expression, and wherever it finds that letter, it's going to highlight that letter by putting it between the HTML mark elements. And then it's going to return that. And we're returning it as safe HTML because this value will be used to inject into the inner HTML attribute of the template. So we need to pass it as safe HTML. And the last observable that we need to create is the sentence stats observable, which of course is of type sentence stats. And this observable is derived from the sentence observable. Now, all that the pipeline of this observable derivation requires is a mapping operator which returns all of the properties of an object of type sentence stats. And once again, I'm just going to paste in the necessary code for this mapping operator. And I'll do all of the imports. And essentially what we have is for the sentence stats object, we have the sentence itself, the sentence property, which we get directly from the sentence observable. We have two alphas, which we use the sentence variable to pass into the car count function, which is one of the many functions that I provided on the util file. And in fact, all of the rest of the properties are just functions that are provided in the utils file that we can pass the sentence and get those counts or values. And the entire object that we create, we want it to be of type sentence stats. Now, in actuality, I was mistaken. There is one last observable that we do have to create, and that's the letter stats observable. And this one is of type letter stats array, and it's derived using the sentence stats observable that we just created. And again, it only needs a mapping operator that returns an array of letter stats objects. So once again, I'm just going to paste in the code. And what this code does is for each letter in the alphabet, which we can create an array of those letters by returning the keys of the sentence stats letter count property, and we'll set that to alpha. And we can call the JavaScript array reduce function on that array of alphas. And for each letter in that array, we can return a letter stat object. And a letter stat object consists of three properties: the letter itself, which is called car, the count, or the number of instances within the sentence, as well as the has highest count. And the has highest count, we can determine if the letter itself is an element within the sentence stats letters with highest count array. And all of this is just pure JavaScript. So now we have all of the necessary observables to create our VM object. And actually, if we go to the component, we can replace this of operator with the actual code from our service. We can call the combineLatest operator and pass it the sentence stats observable, the letter stats observable, and the selected car observable. So we can pass these three observables into the combineLatest operator, join creation operator, and within the pipeline, we can use the withLatestFrom operator and pass it the highlighted sentence observable. Now, the reason for this, we want our stats observable to emit or update each time either sentence stats or letter stats or selected car observables, any time any one of those observables emits. But we don't really want to listen for the highlighted sentence observable. It's not really necessary. So to use the highlighted sentence observable without listening for its emissions, we use the withLatestFrom operator. And then we can just do a simple mapping, which I'll paste in here. And this mapping turns the tuple that's returned from the combineLatest and withLatestFrom operators, we turn that tuple into a VM object consisting of the four properties: sentence stats, letter stats, selected car, and highlighted sentence. Now, as you can see by looking at our browser, everything is working perfectly. We have our initial Pangram sentence being set in the text area. We have the Pangram label being shown, and we have all of our counts being updated in the display area. So we know that the observables that we created, they're all working perfectly. Now, the only thing that we need to do is whenever there's a change in our sentence, whenever we make a manual change in our sentence, we want things to update, because currently, if I remove this W, now we know that this sentence is now a lipogram instead of a pangram, and we should see the W being highlighted and its count being 0. So we need to update our method calls. And specifically, we need to update the method calls on the service, because we have all of our method calls being set properly here in the component. So if we go to the service, we can update the change sentence to emit from the sentence subject. Its value, its parameter value. Likewise, for the change active, which is called when we click on any one of the letter displays, we can do a conditional to check if the count is 0. Because remember, when the count is 0, we don't want anything to occur when letters whose counts are 0, when those are clicked. But if the count is greater than 0, we then want to emit that character from the selected car subject. And lastly, when we click on the Generate Sentence button, we want to pass that sentence onto the sentence subject. And we also want to clear the selected car subject. So we'll pass it the empty string. And now when we remove a letter from the sentence manually, when we remove the W from this Pangram sentence, we now see that the label changes to a lipogram and the W is indeed highlighted in brown. And as expected, when we click on any letter, that letter is highlighted within the text area. And when we click on it a subsequent time, it's unselected. And let's just make sure that our generate a sentence is working properly. Awesome, this is working as well. And we have a lipogram. We have a generated sentence of a lipogram. And if we add the letter Z, which is currently the only letter that doesn't appear in the sentence, if we add it, we should see this sentence change into a Pangram. And indeed we do. Awesome. So this is one of the ways in which we can solve the Pangram challenge. Now, not to worry if your solution doesn't look exactly like mine. Remember, using RxJS, we can solve for coding situations in any number of ways. We can use different combinations of operators, and as a result, your solution may be slightly different from mine, and it can be vastly different from mine. But in the end, the only important thing is that we use the RxJS library to get there. My solution to the Pangram challenge has been pushed to the Pangram repository, and I've used the commit message solution. So I hope you enjoyed this coding challenge, and I hope it helps you strengthen your knowledge of the RxJS library. Stay tuned for our next RxJS workshop coding challenge. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And to stay updated on the latest content from the RxJS workshop, please subscribe to the channel. Do you want to learn more about the RxJS library and many of its features? Please check out my course on the Udemy platform. It's called RxJS Subjects and Operators, What They Do and When to Use Them. You can find the course by clicking on this link on the channel page. Thanks again for tuning in to the RxJS workshop.